So let me articulate a little bit about the 8 fears. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, which is the cultural and spiritual philosophical matrix from which Tara, she arises in Hinduism, but she really takes on a different flavor in the Buddhist tradition. Sort of becomes much more preeminent, I feel. So in that tradition, there are 8 fears described, but the 8 fears are also anything that we're afraid of, any anxiety, any negativity, any obstacle. So just keep that in mind. But we'll go through these 8 fears and just have this sense of, what they might relate to, so we can begin to understand her power and also some of her teachings. So the first fear is lions. And what they symbolize in Buddhist philosophy is pride. Now, I just want to be clear that there's 2 types of pride that Buddhists talk about. So there's the one type of pride that gets in the way. So this is more like arrogance. This is more like, Buddhists call it self-cherishing. That actually sounds like a nice thing, self-cherishing, self-care. So from the Western perspective. So I don't want us to get confused around this. This kind of pride that Tara protects from is a sort of pride that becomes a stumbling block because it separates us. It separates us from our sense of connection. It makes us better than others. My Dzogchen master that I referred to earlier, Nam Kainobu Rinpoche is his name, but he used to speak a lot about how pride is just there, and he'd hear other people talk about things and he'd think, I know more than them, or and he'd just say it in the way that you think, oh my God, we probably do this sort of thing all the time, or I'd say that a bit differently. Like so it can be subtle, but it's there, and it's not about beating ourselves up around it. It's just about acknowledging it, hopefully having a bit of a sense of humor about it that can help to destabilize it. And this relates to play mind, but I'll talk to that in a moment. So pride. The other type of pride, however, that is useful, the Buddhists call Vajra pride. So what is that? That is this complete sense of faith, confidence, and trust. So for example, Vajra pride is when you call on Tara and you know that she's there. You know that you are having this conversation. Doesn't matter if you're having some, lightning strikes, amazing symbols and experiences that confirm it. You just know. If you say Tara in your mind and you want her there, she's there. And the Vajra pride is a little bit like the absolute confidence that you have if you do a ritual or a spell or a healing process for yourself or another. And at the end of it, you might hear that expression, so mote it be, or so be it, or the work is done, or this healing session is now complete. And you have your mind in it. It's happened. It's done. And you don't pollute it with doubt. And I'll talk about doubt a bit later because it's a separate fear. But this Vajra pride is very much the unshakable confidence in you, in the divine, not in being able to control what's happening in the world, but in your capacity to engage and to move through the inevitable obstacles that we all face at different times in ourselves and in just the craziness of the world as it unfolds in its creative display of whatever the hell's going on. There's a lot happening. Some of it's beautiful. Some of it's terrifying. It's a great mystery. And we say, we're here. We're having this journey, and I have this confidence in this divine path that I'm connected to and am willing to live. So that's the protection of lions protection against lions is really about not getting stuck in this bind of this kind of false pride, but getting into this spiritual strength. The next one is wild elephants. That might sound bizarre, but you've got to remember also the cultural context and the landscape, the ecology that this has arisen from. So being trampled by a wild elephant was not, that was a fear. It was a real problem. But what does that mean for us if we're not really in elephant territory? Well, this is kind of about the powerful unconscious drives that can push us into reaction and evoke harm, even if we are well-intentioned. So the protection there is sort of learning how to harness those forces and prevent us from causing harm. And when we don't want to cause harm and we accidentally make something worse, we've probably all had that experience when we, what's that expression? The path to hell is paved with good intentions. Like we really want to do well and we kind of stuff it up, and that happens at different times. So this is kind of a protection around that. So our best efforts through this wisdom that Tara is in us, in everything this grace that we can learn how to kind of tune into and amplify. And I'll give you some practices today, not only our healing journey, but some simple things that you can just do easily through your day if you want to really tune into that. But it's this sense that that energy can help take even our, most clumsy efforts, our most inelegant stumblings, and somehow through that wisdom render them useful and beneficial. And for me, who has a good heart but definitely stuffs things up from time to time, I find that very reassuring. So that's the protection from wild elephants. The next one is forest fires. It doesn't take a lot to imagine what this might look like. Generally, it's connected to anger, but it could be any kind of spread of collective fear. We've probably seen this a lot through the media, collective anger, outrage, this kind of energy that in and of itself is part of life and part of human experience. So I don't want to demonize those things, but this is more around, okay, if I'm feeling something, can I metabolize it before it gets out of control? And there's this song from a band called Stereophonics. I think it was like back in the 90s or something. And there was this line in this song, paraphrasing a little bit, but it was something like, it takes 100 trees to create the box of matches, but it takes one match to burn 1,000 trees. It was something like that. And I was thinking of that in regards to this, because it's this sense of certain things can be very destructive, and they need to be tamed. And anger is one of those things. Sometimes things said in anger, even if there's been a huge amount of love, that can just be obliterated in that one moment. And it can take an enormous amount of work to try and repair it. Hopefully we can. Sometimes, however, that repair is just profoundly more difficult than it needs to be. And more damage is done than what we ever wanted to have happen. And it's just from lack of skillfulness and lack of wisdom. So with Tara, there's some protection from that, which humanity definitely needs. Now, the next one, number 4, snakes. This is often related to jealousy in the Buddhist cosmology. But also when you think about snakes, for me, I think about transformation, the shedding of skins, and also snakes are quite sensitive. They feel vibrations through their belly. It's kind of how they move. So when you think about, as we are becoming more sensitive, this is the first thing that's happening in humanity at the moment, plus the boundaries are becoming less stable and more porous with things like increased ability to travel. Social media is a huge part of this, a massive part. Any, communications, telephonics, all these kind of things. So Wi-Fi, there's a lot more exposure to global vibration, and we will feel it. Many of us will feel it. So the protection of snakes is not only this sense of protection from jealousy, but I feel also protection around how to handle increasing sensitivity in an increasingly intense or multifaceted vibrational environment. So this is important when we're on the spiritual path, particularly because that does increase our sensitivity. Now, the 5th protection is for robbers. So in Buddhist teachings, this relates to having incorrect views. Isn't that interesting? Like being led on a bit of a goose chase, a wild goose chase, or misinformation, or things that kind of put you off in one direction and it ends up being a bit of a red herring or a bit of difficulty. So the idea with this is that her wisdom helps us find the information that we need and not be led astray by things that ultimately might end up causing difficulty. The next one is protection from prisons. They symbolize greed. Think about the prisons of the mind that we make for ourselves sometimes, or this sense of just almost drowning in material possessions. It's not about saying material things are bad. It's more about understanding that whatever we have in our lives requires a certain energy and investment of time to maybe take care of it or think about it or protect it. And there's this classic story that one of my Tibetan teachers tells of a man who was in his community in Tibet, who was told by all of the lamas, because he was very sick, they couldn't heal him. And they said, look, you're going to die. This is just what's happening. You might as well prepare for it. Right? Tibetans, I have found, are quite direct. Anyway, so he thought, oh, well, I better give all my stuff away. So he went about giving his things away, and then he healed. And I just thought that was gorgeous, because it was this sense of releasing old energy. There's a thing sometimes associated with certain warrior and spiritual traditions where they shave their heads, and it's just like getting rid of the energy of what has been before. a release. Or sometimes you might feel it if you give things away. You actually free yourself, and you might be giving things to people that could genuinely benefit from it. So it's generosity as well. So the protection from prison is not only the imprisonment of external, but it's also this sense of, how do I find freedom in this world? How do I not become enslaved in this world? How do I live in a way that keeps me free and open? And that can have material possessions. It's not a problem, but it's a little bit of understanding how this is working with your energy. So Tara helps with that. Number 7 is floods. And this represents attachment. And just think of attachment as like a subtle difference to connection. You can feel connected, and we are connected to all of life. Floods, as representing attachment, is a little bit more where we grasp and we hold on from a place of fear, of not wanting to let go, or feeling that if we don't kind of hold on and try to have things happen in a certain way, if we don't try to control it, everything's going to fall apart. That's often an expression of early childhood trauma, but we can all feel that at different times. So floods and protection from floods is a little bit like protection from trying to control everything. And when we are trying to control everything, we're sort of pulling all this energy in. We can overwhelm ourselves and feel completely dictated to and controlled by our schedule, or our beliefs about how things should be, or scripts and belief systems that might have been running in our heads and maybe were more appropriate 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, or even 1 year ago, or 5 months ago, than what they are now. So protection from floods is this ability to kind of be lifted in a way, and supported and rescued from through our own wisdom and this manifestation of Tara's presence within. The last one that I want to talk about is demons, not so protection. Now, in the Christian mystical tradition, that's taken quite literally as being certain types of beings. And in Buddhist cosmology, there are many types of beings, that different classes of beings that this includes protection from. But really, in a kind of very relevant day-to-day sense for most of us, this is about doubt. The key demon is considered doubt. Now, that's really interesting. Why is that? Well, let's think about what doubt does. It makes us turn away. It destabilizes the Vajra pride that I talked about earlier. It starts to put in this sense of the possibility of despair, the possibility of not being able to move forward, the possibility of things not working out in some way or the other if we don't control it. So doubt is quite insidious. Now, this doesn't mean we have to become this kind of psychotically, this psychotically confident. This is not about that. Remember, this is not about arrogance. This is not about having this sense of false pride. Having a sense of overcoming doubt is really about being in that Vajra pride place of belief, believing in the divine, believing in what is possible, even if we don't see or have a clear sense of what that's going to look like or how it's going to show up. So she protects from this. And I can tell you that as that seed of doubt begins to crumble and it gets replaced with this seed of confidence, the doubts may come and go, but they'll be far less grippy. They won't feel like they have quite so much power. And what happens as this starts to occur is that you expend less energy on anxiety and worry, and that energy can go into processing and metabolizing whatever you're working with in the moment, whatever feelings or issues you're dealing with, and whatever's required of you to take steps forward in your world in a way that feels aligned. So have more energy. And underneath it all, you have a little bit more equanimity, because you know things are going to work out, even if you don't know exactly how. You have more sense of trust, and then you're willing to it's a little bit more like inner resilience. You can be pushed around a little bit by life and not feel quite so hammered by it. You're just a little bit like, well, this is happening. It's like jostling through a car park or something where there's a lot of people. It's like, well, there's going to be a bit of a thing here, but it's okay. It's not permanent. We're just passing through.